Hi, I'm Akshay, and I'll be giving you a quick walkthrough of how the Haptik's IVA Builder tool works. But before we get into it, we need to understand that there are two aspects involved in building an IVA. The first is to train the natural language understanding model so that your IVA can understand the incoming user queries. The second is to actually build out the conversational flow. The great thing about Haptik's IVA Builder tool is that it lets you do both of these very easily using a simple to use UI. Click on the Builder option from the menu to open up our tool. The first step is to actually set up our IVA. We can do this by clicking on the New Board button on the top left corner. And for the sake of this demo, we'll be building out an IVA for a fake e-commerce company called the Amazing Store. We'll try to handle a bunch of typical use cases that an e-commerce company would have. So let's fill out the required details. We'll call the bot name as the Amazing Store. And we'll put the same name here as well. You might notice that there are two fields called a business and partner, and you might be wondering what these are. So what Haptik's IVA Builder tool does is it breaks down the IVA into a set of hierarchies, which are the partner, business, and the bot. The bot is where your IVA actually lives, which is where your flows and the natural language understanding is configured. The business is where you put the other configurations like the menu items, the bot break message, and the platforms you want to deploy your business on. Haptik's IVA Builder tool allows you to deploy your business to Facebook Messenger, WhatsApp, web, native apps, and a lot more. Partner is typically the client or the company for whom you're actually building out the IVA. So for the demo, let's call the business as the Amazing Store. And we'll call the partner also as the Amazing Store. Let's click on Create Bot to actually set up our IVA. Now that our IVA is set up, we can start building it out. To start creating our IVA, we need to click on the View Bot button. This takes us to the Stories page. So a story is typically a category of use cases that you want to solve using your IVA. For our fake e-commerce company, we want to handle all order-related issues. So we'll create a story called Order-Related Issues. Let's just type in Order-Related Issues and click on Create Story to actually create the story. So now that our story is created, we can open it up by clicking on Order-Related Issues, and this lands us on the graph page. The graph page is where most of your IVA building actually happens. To get started here, you'll have to click on New Substory. So substories lets you break down your high level issues that you want to solve and break them down into smaller subcategories. For example, our story was order related issues. So we can create two substories, one for handling refund related issues and the other for handling issues around order status. So let's create those substories by clicking on the new substory here. We'll call the first substory refund status or refund issues. And then we'll create another substory for order status. So now the substories are created, we can start adding nodes into them. Nodes are the fundamental blocks of building an IVA inside the Haptik's tool. The Haptik's IVA Builder tool provides you an option to use three different types of nodes. They are the static node, code node, and the output node. The static node is useful when you want to give simple responses or you want to collect some information from the user. The code node lets you integrate with external APIs or external databases by writing simple Python code. The output node allows you to use the return data from the integration and try to build a bot response out of it. So now that we've seen that there are three different types of nodes, we can start building our flow. It's recommended that before you start building the flow, you have some sort of a conversation design ready with you, which will help you build out the flow easily. For the sake of this demo, we'll start by building the refund issues flow. The way this flow will work, a user will come in and say that he or she wants to get a refund, and we'll give them a simple response where we'll redirect them to a link where they can go and apply for a refund. Because it's a simple use case where there's a question and a response, we can use a static node. The way to use a static node is we simply drag and drop it on the graph. We'll call the node as apply for refund. And because this is where our conversation is going to start, we'll mark this as a start node. We finally hit save to save the node, and the node's created. Now the first thing here is, because we said this is where our conversation is going to start, we need to tell the node what sort of things the user can actually say and when should this node be triggered. So this is the NLU training part of the IVA that we initially talked about. You can add you can add sample responses that a user is typically going to say into the independent responses box here. As you can see, the placeholder, it says type what the user will say. The more data you add here, the better your training gets. But for the sake of this demo, and it's generally recommended that if you at least add 5 responses, you can expect very good behavior from the NLP system. So we'll add an example saying I will, or I want a refund, and we'll add a bunch more here. Will you be able to give me? Once we added a bunch of sample user says, the next thing is to add did you mean button text. So Haptik's IVA comes with an inbuilt feature called disambiguation, wherein if the AI system is confused around what the user was actually saying, we ask the user for confirmation by sending them a message asking them, did you mean this? So a good way to do this is to just describe what this node actually does. So like we can put it as apply for refund. So if the AI system is ever confused about the intent, it will send out a message to the user saying, did you mean apply for refund? So now that we've added the did you mean button text and the user says, let's just hit on save to save this node. The next step is to actually put in the response. To do that, we go to bot says, click on bot says here, and we click on add chat element. Right now, we just want to add a simple text response, so we click on text and quick replies, and we add a response here. So we can say, sure, you can go ahead and apply for a refund. We'll give it a fake website, amazingstore.com/refunds. And to make it a little more personalized and make it feel more human, we'll add a emoji here, and we'll click on done. Finally, we'll click on save to save this node. Now that we've added both the user says and bot says, we can start testing out the flow. But before we do that, we need to actually train the AI system. You can do that by clicking on the train button here. And yes. So typically this can take from anywhere between 30 seconds to a minute based on number of nodes you have and amount of data that's there. So we'll just wait for it to complete training. You can know that a bot is being trained by looking at the train button. If it's disabled, it means the bot is currently training. And once the training is done, the button will get enabled again. So now that the train button is enabled, we know that training is done. We can test out the bot by clicking on the test bot button here and entering our message, which is I want a refund. And we see that our configured response comes in. So this is how you can add a simple question and a response. But as I previously mentioned, you can also use a static node to collect some data from the user. So let's go and set that up. Let's say instead of giving a simple response, we wanted to collect information around what payment method the user actually used to make the purchase. And if they've used a credit card, then we give them a refund. But if they've used something like a gift card, then there's no refund available for them. So to do that, we need to collect data. And the way you collect data inside the IVA is by using entities. So to create an entity, we click on this add an entity button. And for now, we create a local entity. Let's call the entity name as Amazing Store Payment Method. And in description, we'll say it collects the payment method from the user. Next thing we'll do we'll have to add an entity reprompt message. Entity reprompt message is a message that gets sent to the user if they don't provide the information in the first go. So here we can ask them that question saying, which payment method did you use? And to make it easier for the user to respond to this, we can add something called as quick replies. Quick replies are tappable buttons that the user will get on the screen, which they can easily tap instead of typing the whole response. So we'll first add a quick reply called credit card. And then we'll add another option called gift card. So now that we added both the options, we can save this by clicking on done and clicking on save here to save the entity. So now that the entity is saved, we'll have to create the two values and we'll have to add the two values inside the dictionary. So the first value is credit card. And we can add variants on what are the words that the user will actually use to mention this entity. So we can say credit card, CC, card, and then we'll add our second option, which is the gift card. And for this, the user can say things like gift card, voucher, discount, coupon, or simply a coupon. So now that we've added the dictionary words that the user can use to mention this payment method, we click on save again, save the entity. And now that we have our entity defined, we can add it to bot saves by clicking on the add to bot saves button. Finally, we go into the entity and add the question here, which will be asked to the user. We can keep it similar to what the entity prompt actually is. Which payment method did you use? And we'll add a quick reply for credit card. And a quick reply for gift cards. We'll finally click on done to save it. The final step is to add a final response. A final response is the response you want to give to the user once you've collected all the entities. So in this case, you want to say, thanks for the information. It's generally good to give some sort of feedback to the end user around the fact that you already collected data and you can give them some feedback that the data is collected and you're processing it. So now that we also added the final response, we can click on save to save this node. And the next step that we want to do is if the user has chosen credit card as their option, we want to give them the bot saves where we send them to the refund link. And if they select gift card, we want to tell them that, sorry, there's no refund possible for you. So for both of those cases, we need to add nodes and we can use a static node for both the cases. So first, let's create a static node called credit card refund. And this is not where the conversation is starting, so we don't have to mark it as a start node. But this is where our conversation actually ends. So we can mark this as an end node. What this tells the bot is this is where the conversation is ending, so you can clear out any context that you already have. So we click on save to save this node. And inside the bot saves, which is the response, we add the link. So we can go into text and quick replies and we can add a message saying, sure, you can get a refund by going to amazingstore.com/refunds. And we'll add an emoji to make it more personalized. We finally click on done and click on save to save the node. Similarly, we'll add another static node for gift cards. We'll call it gift card refund. We'll mark even this one as a node because this is where the conversation for refund status is ending. And we click on save. We add a response inside our bot says, similarly to how we did it for the credit card mode. So here we say, sorry, we do not offer refunds for gift card purchases. And we finally click on done and save the node. So now that even though all three nodes that we need are created, they're not connected in any way and there's no way for the bot to know which node to trigger between the credit card refund and the gift card refund. So the way you tell the bot or the IVA how to do that is by creating connections. You can create connections between two nodes, holding down shift and then dragging your mouse to create the connection. And inside the connection, we can choose how the transition happens from the parent node to the child node. You can either do it based on user says, based on what the user is saying, or you can do it based on entities. Entities are the values that are collected from the user. So in this case, because we've collected an entity called payment method, we'll use the entities option. And you can see that our entity is already pre-filled here, which is the amazing store payment method. And entity transitions can happen on three conditions. Like you can either tell it to not connect on this entity or connect via entity presence, which is basically telling the connection to be triggered whenever the entity is collected, or you can do it when a specific value is collected, which is what we need here. So we'll click on connect via entity value and we'll choose our option as credit card. And we'll finally hit on save this node. Similarly, we create a connection for the gift card and we'll go to entities, choose the entity that we want, connect via entity value, and we'll say gift card. Then save to save this. And now that all our flow is built out, we can train the bot to start testing it. So now that training is done, we can test the bot. Let's just hide this. We can click on test bot to test it. We'll start the new flow. We want to start a new test session. We can do that by hitting the refresh button on top. We'll start the flow by entering our message, which is I want a refund. Now it's asking me which payment method did I use. So to start off, we'll test out by clicking on credit card. And it tells me I can get a refund by going to this website. Let's test the other flow. And this is the great feature of the IVA tool where you can just refresh the test session to create a new test. So here we'll say I want a refund. And this time I'll click on gift cards. And it tells me that I can't get a refund because I used a gift card. Another great feature when you're testing the bot is you can actually look at the logs. You can do that by clicking on the log button here. It actually tells you all the details that went into coming up with the result. So it tells you what business this belonged to, what the bot was. It also tells you which node was detected. So in this case, the node detected was gift card refund, which is what we wanted. It also gives you the detected entities and the values. So we had an entity called Amazing Store Payment Method, and it's telling me that the value it detected was gift card. So this is useful when things go wrong. You can actually look at what was detected and you can make corrections based on that. Apart from just collecting entities and transitioning to different nodes based on the values of entities, the IVA Builder tool also lets you integrate with external systems. Let's take a look at how to do that by using the order status flow. In the order status flow, a user will come in and ask for the status of their order. We'll integrate with a third-party API to find out what the status of the order is, whether it's being shipped, whether it's still being packed, or whether it's already delivered. And then we'll just send that response back to the user. So to get started, we'll add the first static node, which is where our conversation will start. We'll call this order status, or we order status, and we'll mark it as a start node because this is where our conversation is going to start. And then we'll click save to save the node. We'll first add user says, and in sample responses, we can add a few things that the user might actually say to start this conversation. So what is my order status? Can you tell me the status of my order? Please tell me the status. And in the review main button, we'll add as order status and click on save to save it. Now let's add a bot says response. So now that the user has come and asked for their order status, we'll ask them if they want to know the status of their last order. So we'll just add a question saying, do you want to know the status of the last order? And we'll give them a quick reply option to say yes or no. So we'll first add a quick reply called yes, and then we'll add a quick reply called no. We'll click on done and save it. So the way the flow will work is if the user says that they want to get the order status for this last order, we'll make the API integration and give them the status. If they say they want it for something else, we'll just ask them to go to the order page on the website. So let's add a node to handle the case where they say they want order status older one. So we'll say older order status. And this is not a start of the conversation, so we don't have to mark it as a start node. But this is where the conversation ends in this for this flow. So we'll mark it as an end node. I click save. And inside what says we can add a message saying you can get the status for all your orders at amazingstore.com/orders. We'll add an emoji to make it more personalized. And click on done. And save it. We want the IVA to come to this node if the user has clicked on no or has said no at the order status level. So here we'll add no as an option. The thing is, even at the connection level, we need to add a did you mean button text, because if the bot gets confused around which node to go, it can use this did you mean button to get confirmation from the user. So we'll add the did you mean button text as no. Save it. So now whenever the user says no to this question, which is did you want to know the status of the last order? When they say no, they go to the older order status where we just send them to the web page. Like now let's add the flow where they say yes. So we'll add a new static node saying last order status. This is not a start conversation, but this is also not the end because we're going to do some API integrations after this. So we'll not take any of these and just click on save. And in the bot says, you can say, okay, let me find the order status for you. And click on done and save. So we'll add a connection from order status to the last order status. And we want this to be triggered whenever the user says yes. And we'll add the did you mean button text also yes, and save it. So now inside the last order status, we want to add a code node, which is what will allow us to do the API integration. So we'll call this get order status. So the code node is basically a code editor where you can go write any Python code to integrate with a third-party system. For the sake of this demo, we'll be writing some sample code which gives a random value of packed, shipped, or delivered. So all of our output has to go into this final response. So we'll need a variable called status here. And we'll also need another variable called status, which is just the status of how this code integration actually ran. So we'll just put it as true for now. And we'll just remove all of these other things. We'll have to calculate the order status. So we'll say order status here. And we'll just write some code to randomly choose an option between packed, shipped, and delivered. And we want to send this out in the order status. The good thing about the code editor is it actually lets you test your code. So I can just click on save to save my code. And then I can run it to see what the output is. So it's picked the random value of shipped. So we'll close this now. The next thing we'll do is we have to give a sample output format. So if we can go back, we can see that our output format is order status and delivered. So we can just copy this and paste it here. And we can save this. Now the next thing is to actually make the connection between last order status and get order status. So again, it's as simple as just doing a shift and drag. And because there's no conditions based on which we want to run this, this transition automatically happens once the last order status is completed processing. So now that the code is running and it's giving us an output in this format, we need to use this to give a response to the user. We can do that by using an output node. So just as a reminder, an output node helps you convert your code output and give a bot response from it. So we'll call it as return order status. We'll mark this as end node because this is where our conversation ends. Click on save. And inside the bot save section, we can go in and add your order status is. And now we can use the values that are outputted by the code node. You can do that by just clicking on this add variable button. If you see there's no data provided, the reason is we haven't made the connection from the code node to the output node. So let's do that first. We'll just save this for now. And we'll make a connection from the code node to the output node. And we want this connection to be running whenever the status is equal to true. So we'll select that from add variable here, status, and we want it to be equal to true, which basically means if the integration has run successfully, we want this connection to run. And inside return order status, now if you go into bot says and click on add variable, you'll find the variables that the code is giving you, and you can select order status from here. So now the bot will basically respond with your order status is and whatever the code returned here. So we click on done and we hit save to save this. Now that our flow is complete, we can test it out. But before that, we need to train the bot. So like previously we did, we'll just click on train. So now that the button is enabled, we know that training is completed. Let's just hide this and start testing our bot. So we want to create a new test session. So we'll refresh this page. And now to test the order status, we'll say, what is my order status? So it's asking me if I want to know the status of my last order. So let's test out the no flow first. We'll click on no. And then it says I can get the status of all my orders at this website. So let's also test the flow where I say yes. So we'll again type in what is the status of my order. And it's asking me if I want to know the status of my last order, and here I say yes. So it's saying, okay, let me find it, and it's telling me my order is packed, which is this output actually came from the code node. And this was randomly picked, but in a real world scenario, you can make a third-party API integration to get this value. So that's a quick overview of how the bot builder tool works. Thank you.